It's red.
For as long as people have called this place home, they've been welcomed with clean air, clean water, and an abundance of nature. As time went on, people saw the need to balance how we build cities with how we protect farms and forests. That's why across Greater Portland, in 24 cities and 3 counties, there's one metro government that brings us all together to maintain that vital balance, to provide services across cities and counties, to create a better future together. Hello, we're Metro. We plan for housing, jobs, and safe transportation. We protect land, air, and water by managing garbage and recycling. We support arts and culture by overseeing local venues to keep the economy growing. And we connect people to nature across 17,000 acres of parks and trails and at the Oregon Zoo. Metro is all of us working together, connecting how we live today with how we plan for the future. Hello, we're Metro, and so are you.
We have a quorum. I'm calling the Metro Council business meeting for January 26, 2023 to order. I will now ask our clerk, Connor, to call the roll for attendance.
Thank you, President Peterson. Councilor Gonzalez.
Present. And good morning.
Good morning. Councilor Rosenthal.
Here.
Councilor Lewis.
Present.
Councilor Wong.
Present.
Councilor Nolan.
Good morning.
Good morning. Councilor Simpson is excused today, and President Peterson.
Here, thank you. Before we begin our agenda items, can we please play the safety video for our in-person attendees?
I'm Mike Reese, and I'm the Dive Safety Officer here at the Oregon Zoo, and safety is a big part of my job. Some of the things we consider here is diver safety. I'm out here at the Oregon Zoo, and you're at the Metro Regional Center. The council chamber is located on the 3rd floor of this building. In the event of fire or fire alarm, please exit through the door in the northeast corner of the room, go down the steps to the 2nd floor, and exit through the main entrance by the reception desk and gather in the courtyard outside the entrance. In the event of a medical or fire emergency, please call 911 and notify the security agent at the front desk. The nearest defibrillator is mounted on the steps leading from the reception desk down to Grand Avenue. Thank you.
All right, we will now open our public communications. Connor, will you please describe to the audience our procedures for the public communication portion of the meeting on non-agenda items?
Yes, thank you. So if anyone wishes to testify on non-agenda items, now is the time to do so. Public testimony will be limited to 3 minutes, and I'll manage a timer to go off at the 3-minute mark. For those joining us on Zoom, if you've not already signed up to speak, you can sign up now by hitting the raise hand button. Depending on your version of Zoom, the raise hand button is either at the bottom of your screen or within the reactions tab. If you're dialing in on your phone, you can raise your hand by hitting *9. And for those of us joining in person, you can sign up now by filling out one of the blue cards in the back of the room and bringing it up to me. For those testifying virtually today, to allow you to turn on your cameras, I'll be promoting you to a full panelist. So I'll call your name. You'll see a window pop up asking you to accept that promotion. Once you accept it, you'll be rejoined as a panelist where you'll be able to turn on your camera and unmute yourself. So with that, once again, folks, if you would like to testify, please go ahead and hit that raise hand button. Councilors, we have not had anybody sign up in advance to testify, though there was a little bit of written testimony that was sent to you this morning along with the presentations. Okay. And after a couple of seconds, I still don't see anybody with their hand up, President Peterson.
All right, with that, we'll close public communication on non-agenda items for today. Thank you. And move on to our consent agenda. Our consent agenda now consists of one item, consideration of the December 15th, 2022 council meeting minutes. Do I have a motion for the consent agenda?
I move approval.
And a second? Thank you. Moved by Councilor Gonzalez and seconded by Councilor Nolan. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those
Aye.
opposed? It passes. Thank you. We'll move on to our resolution number 23-5312 for the purpose of confirming the appointment of David Pendleton to the Metropolitan Exposition Recreation Commission. Today we have Metro's GM of Visitor Venues, Steve Falstick, to present the resolution. Welcome, Steve, as you come aboard. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you, Council President Peterson and councilors. As mentioned, I'm here today to speak to Resolution 23-5312 for the purpose of confirming the appointment of David Pendleton as a MERC commissioner. And I'm really pleased to be here to present Mr. Pendleton. The Clackamas County Commission, as mentioned in your staff report, recommended the appointment of David Pendleton following the resignation of John Erickson on December 7th. Of this past year for membership on the commission, and the Metro Council president has appointed Mr. Pendleton to the commission subject to Metro Council confirmation. If confirmed, Pendleton will, pursuant to Metro Code, serve the remainder of Mr. Erickson's term ending January 26, 2024. I do want to share just a bit about David Pendleton, who I've known for several years through his work with Travel Portland and his work in the tourism industry. David has worked on both domestic and international travel with State of Oregon and Brand USA to promote and serve as an ambassador for the tourism industry. He's an accomplished and integrity-driven logistics expert with more than 15 years of tourism experience, 20 plus years of supply chain distribution and transportation management. He's been recognized as a visionary leader and critical thinker who uses a well thought out approach and strategy for planning and development. He's recognized as resourceful for improving business relationship with customers, suppliers, and industry stakeholders. As we talk about the growth of tourism in the state of Oregon over the last 20 years, the conversation can't be had without mentioning David Pendleton's work, his engagement, his involvement in both domestic and international interest in coming to our wonderful state. He currently is co-owner of Hub World Travel. They do tours and attract visitors from all across the United States and an incredible amount internationally. David does a tremendous amount of work internationally to help set our wonderful state apart as a great place to visit. Some of the other collaboration and support for Mr. Pendleton, he's currently on the Oregon Tourism Commission. He's currently on the Willamette Falls Authority, the Clackamas County Tourism Development Council, past board member and board chair for Travel Portland, past board member for Oregon Shakespeare Festival, just to name a few of the highlights.
Awesome. Thank you. Councilor Lewis.
Sure. Thank you so much, Steve, for bringing forward such great comments about David's resume. I've had the opportunity to work with him on the Willamette Falls Locks Authority. I've also seen him at Travel Portland breakfasts and the like. He will be an amazing addition to MERC. I'm sad still about the need to appoint somebody at this time. Oh, buddy, you're sad too. And it's regrettable that we didn't actually have time to celebrate Dave Erickson's contributions with more fanfare while he was still with us. But I do look forward to this appointment, and I think it is, appropriate that we take a little bit of time to just reflect on why we're having to do this midterm. But it is a good appointment for Clackamas County. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other comments?
If appropriate, could I make a motion to adopt Resolution 23-5312?
Sure. Do I have a second?
I will second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, Connor, will you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Councilor Nolan.
Yes.
Councilor Wong.
Yes.
Councilor Lewis.
Aye.
Councilor Rosenthal.
Aye.
Councilor Gonzalez.
Aye.
And President Peterson.
Aye. The motion passes. Thank you. All right. Moving on to our ordinance number 22-1487 for the purpose of amending Metro Code Section 2.02.010. First reading and public hearing. Councilors, as you saw in your packets, this code change relates to the employment agreements and works to improve the clarity and consistency of our code. As you recall, this item was originally scheduled for our January 5th meeting, but was moved to today's agenda to worked to add additional clarity to the ordinance. I believe we will have our COO, Marisa Madrigal, kick us off.
Thank you, President Peterson. Good morning, Metro Councilors. I'd first like to appreciate President Peterson and the Metro Council for giving our team additional time to edit the language of this proposed code change. Many thanks also to Auditor Evans for his feedback, which I think has allowed us to land on better language that is clear, understandable, and minimizes the opportunity for misunderstandings in the future. The ordinance before you concerns the authority of the Metro Council to delegate signature authority to the Chief Operating Officer for employment contracts. As discussed at a council work session a few weeks ago, employment contracts are an important recruitment and risk mitigation tool for certain executive positions where contracts are industry standard. As your Chief Operating Officer, I take seriously the council's trust in me and whoever comes after me to execute agreements on your behalf. I believe the process laid out in the proposed changes to the code does allow the council to set firm, clear parameters around when and how the COO may request authority to enter into employment contracts. This ordinance amends the code to affirm the council's authority to delegate authority to the COO for this purpose. However, actually exercising the council's delegation authority requires a second step, a resolution approved by council at some point in the future, wherein the COO requests the authority to enter into employment contracts, either with individuals or groups of employees defined by classification. So at this point, I'm going to hand things to Joyce Wan from the Metro Attorney's Office to talk about the language.
Thank you. Good morning, Council President Peterson and members of the council. My name is Joyce Wan. For the record, I'm with the Metro Attorney's Office and I use she, her pronouns. I primarily advise Metro Management and the Human Resources Department on labor and employment matters. And I am here to present on ordinance number 22-1487, which seeks to clarify the personnel section of the Metro Code dealing with employment agreements. Following the work session held in December, the Metro Attorney's Office went through Metro Code Section 2.02.010 and drafted the ordinance, which is currently before you for its first reading. This ordinance does four things. First, it clarifies that employment agreements may be entered into for executive level positions. The term executive level is clearly defined as any department director, venue director, deputy chief operating officer, and general manager. Executive level replaces the term director level. There was some question whether the term director level included the positions of venue director, deputy COO, and general manager, and this amendment eliminates that ambiguity. Second, the ordinance clarifies that the terms in executive level employment agreements must be identical except for compensation rather than salary. This amendment clarifies that the COO may negotiate salary as well as vacation accruals. This aligns with our current practice as reflected in the form employment agreement, which has previously been approved by Metro Council. It also aligns with Oregon's pay equity law, which looks at compensation and not just salary. The ordinance also specifically provides that any resolution which delegates authority to the COO to execute an employment agreement for a group of positions must clearly state the position and the compensation-related provisions for which the delegation has been granted. And finally, the ordinance makes clear that employment agreements may only be amended if approved and authorized by Metro Council. These proposed amendments seek to clarify ambiguities in this section of the code. These changes are not intended to change the substance or meaning of the code. As was noted earlier, this ordinance affirms the council's ability to delegate authority to the COO. In the future, if the council desires to provide this authority to the COO, it would require another step in the form of a resolution. Finally, the Metro Attorney's Office has reviewed the section of the code from the plain and inclusive language perspective and with the goal of improving clarity and understanding. For example, we have removed passive voice and replaced legalistic terms such as shall for will and must. We have also removed nominals in place of action verbs. And one example of this can be found in subsection A, entitled Duties of the Chief Operating Officer, and you will see we replaced the nouns administration and enforcement with administers and enforces. Also, an example of inclusive language is found where we replace the gendered his or her delegee with the actual position title. And again, this example can be found in subsection A, as well as the definitions section. So that concludes my brief presentation and overview. COO Madrigal, Metro Attorney McLaren, and I are all happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilors, any questions? Councilor Gonzalez.
Thank you, President Peterson, and thank you for the presentation and for taking extra time to make sure that we land the plane with all the considerations that we need to take. So I tried to take the detailed notes to follow the legal jargon. I'm not an attorney, but I have a lot of great attorney friends. Many of them who are in this room and on Zoom. So anyway, that last point, the number 4, where it says an employment agreement can only be amended by Metro Council. Am I repeating that correctly? Like just in terms of.
Correct.
Okay, so I guess I'm just wondering about the situation if, we were to delegate authority to our COO, and let's say a general manager or whoever is entered into an employment agreement, if for some reason someone had to be terminated or demoted or whatever in that circumstance, would the COO not have the authority to do that, only the council? And would then that have to become a public thing? That sounds like I don't want to.
Yeah.
I don't know. That sounds like an uncomfortable situation.
Yeah. The current form employment agreement allows for termination and also for reassignment. So those particular examples that you mentioned would not require the COO to come back to you by resolution. It would be something like one example was during COVID, when all directors were asked to take furlough. That changed some terms and conditions related to their compensation and benefits. And I believe that was brought before council.
Yeah. Okay.
That's the type of amendment that would come before you.
All right, excellent. And I guess I like the streamlining of language just across the board. That sounds great. Just a general operational question. I mean, for our executive level positions, how long are our employment agreements usually? Are they 3-year terms, 2-year terms? Are they kind of windowed? So, basically every year you have a batch of folks that you're working with, or how does that work? I guess it's just more of curiosity.
The agreement becomes effective when all the parties sign, and it remains in effect until the person decides to leave or we decide to terminate.
Okay, but it's not per se like for 3 years. It's not like a contract. It's basically once you're hired, this is your agreement for as long as you're at Metro.
Correct.
All right, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Rosenthal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick clarification. In the phrase identical except for compensation, is that compensation in the strict sense or the broader sense, including compensation, total compensation package?
It's in the broader sense, compensation which would include benefits such as vacation.
Okay.
All right, seeing no other hands raised, we will move on to our public hearing for ordinance number 22-1487. I will now open that public hearing. And Connor, will you please describe to the audience our procedures for the public hearing?
Yes, thank you, President Peterson. If anyone wishes to testify now on ordinance number 22-1487, now is the time to do so. Public testimony will be limited to 3 minutes, and I'll manage a timer to go off at the 3-minute mark. If you've not already signed up to speak, you can do so now. If you're joining us on Zoom, you can sign up by hitting the raise hand button, which depending on your version of Zoom is at the bottom of your screen or within the reactions tab. For those joining us in person, you can sign up by filling out one of the blue cards in the back of the room and bringing that up to me. For those testifying virtually today, I will be promoting you to a full panelist, so I'll call your name. You'll see a window pop up asking you to accept that promotion. Once you accept it, you'll rejoin as a panelist where you'll be able to turn on your camera and unmute yourself. As a reminder to everybody testifying today, you do not need to give your physical address. However, please do identify yourself for the record before testifying. So with that, I'll give folks just another couple of seconds to hit the raise hand button or to bring me up a card. All right, and President Peterson, I don't see any hands going up.
All right. With that, since we don't have anybody coming forward either, seeing no more testimony, I will close the public hearing. Our second reading for council consideration and vote are scheduled for February 9th. Ms. Wong, thank you so much for all of your work on this, and to both our COO and attorney.
Thank you.
Ordinance number 23-1489 for the purpose of annexing to the Metro District boundary approximately 11.17 acres located in Wilsonville at the west end of Southwest Frog Pond Lane and north of Southwest Brisbane Street is our next agenda item. We have Carrie McLaren to please read, our attorney to read the procedural requirements for this portion of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, President Peterson, members of the council. Because this annexation involves a land use application that requires a quasi-judicial hearing, there are some additional procedural requirements that must be addressed. First, council members must declare a conflict of interest or ex parte contact prior to the staff presentation. If a councilor has a conflict of interest, they are not allowed to participate in the council discussion or vote on that application. If a councilor has had an ex parte contact, they must declare the substance of it on the record, and it is subject to rebuttal. Discussions with Metro staff are not considered ex parte contacts. Councilors will be asked to declare any conflict of interest or an ex parte contact after I describe additional procedural requirements. For quasi-judicial hearings of this type, Oregon land use statutes require I provide the following statement of required procedures. Under Section 3.09.070 of the Metro Code, this type of annexation into the Metro District boundary must be initiated by petition, which must be reviewed and acted on by council following a public hearing. Public testimony at this hearing should only address the applicable approval criteria. The approval criteria are set forth in Code Section 3.09070 of the Metro Code and are more specifically identified in the staff report, which is part of the packet of materials before council today. The decision of the council is final, although it can be challenged by filing a notice of intent to appeal with the Land Use Board of Appeals within 21 days of the final decision. If any person fails to raise an issue in person during the hearing or by letter, or fails to provide sufficient evidence to allow the council to respond to an issue, that issue may not be the basis for an appeal to LUBA. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity give the council an opportunity to respond to the issues precludes an action for damages in circuit court under ORS 197.796. As to the hearing procedures, first, Metro staff will present a short report. The staff report will describe the proposal, identify the applicable approval criteria, and summarize the staff recommendation. The applicant may then make a presentation in support of their application. Following any applicant's presentation, other persons in support of the application will be given the opportunity to speak, followed by opponents of the application, if any. The applicant may then rebut any testimony from opponents, and public testimony will then be closed. After the record is closed to all parties, council members may discuss the request and ask questions of staff. A council vote will not be held until after the second reading. This hearing is part of the official record. In your testimony, please speak specifically about this application and how the criteria relate to the request. Please submit a copy of any written testimony, and we will maintain that as part of the record. That concludes my remarks.
Thank you. The case matter being reviewed is proposed ordinance number 23-1489 for the purpose of annexing to the Metro District boundary approximately 11.17 acres located in Wilsonville at the west end of Southwest Frog Pond Lane and north of Southwest Brisbane Street. Do any councilors have any ex parte contacts to disclose? Seeing no hands raised on the screen and shaking heads at the dais, The answer is no. Do any counselor members have a conflict of interest to declare? Same, none. All right. Thank you. I will now have Malou Wilkinson, Metro's Equitable Development and Investments Program Director, kick us off.
Thank you, Council President Peterson. Good morning, members of the Metro Council. I am just here today to introduce Glenn Hamburg. It is his first time in front of you. We're really thrilled to have him join us in November, and he's taking over from the work that many of you are familiar with. Tim O'Brien led this work of managing our boundaries for many years, and so Glenn is going to take it over with great hands, but I just wanted to be sure to give you a chance to, give myself a chance to introduce him. So we're thrilled to have Glenn, and he's going to, you're in good hands with him. So go ahead.
Thank you, Malou.
Welcome.
Good morning, President Peterson and councilors. Glenn Hamburg, and I use he, him pronouns. I'm joining Metro after a little bit more than 6 years as a land use planner for Clackamas County. And I'm excited to join the Metro team and to serve the current and future residents of our region. With my Clackamas County background, I'm excited that this first time before you involves Clackamas County in one sense. Before you today is an ordinance which, if adopted, would annex to the Metro district boundary approximately 11.17 acres located in Wilsonville. Annexations to the district are somewhat routine, but are an important administrative step to allow for urban development, including urban residential development. The subject territory is part of the Frog Pond West area, which has already been planned consistent with Urban Growth Management Functional Plan Title 11 for new urban areas. And while the territory is already inside of the urban growth boundary, already inside the corporate limits of the city of Wilsonville, and has indeed already been approved for a subdivision, it is necessary to be annexed to the district boundary in order for that development to occur. As the staff report outlines, there are criteria for annexation to the metro boundary, and those are in subsection 309070E. And there are three criteria to consider. One, whether the territory is inside of the urban growth boundary. Two, whether the territory is subject to measures that would prevent its urbanization until it is annexed to a city or annexed to a service district that would provide for urban services. And then finally, three, that the annexation proposal be consistent with any applicable cooperative urban services agreements in statute and any concept plan. So as outlined in the staff report, this application meets that criteria for annexation to the metro boundary. The territory was added to the urban growth boundary in 2002 with the adoption of Metro Ordinance 02969B. It was then annexed to the city of Wilsonville 20 years later in 2022 by City of Wilsonville Ordinance 866. The city of Wilsonville adopted the Frog Pond West Master Plan in 2017, and that plan calls for urban residential development of the subject territory. Consistent with that plan, the subject territory has already been designated with the comprehensive plan map designation of residential neighborhood. And as I've noted, the subject territory is already in the corporate limits of the city, so it's not in the county's land use jurisdiction any longer. Urban services to the territory's prospective development will be provided by the city of Wilsonville. The owners of the subject territory have consented to this annexation. Notice of the proposal was published in the Oregonian, posted on site, and mailed to property owners within the area of the subject property. We also sent notice to other interested parties, such as the city of Wilsonville and Clackamas County. Staff have received no written comments on the proposal. However, we did receive one phone call from a nearby property owner who was in support of the proposal. With all of that, staff recommends approval of the ordinance, number 23-1489, and I'm available to help answer any questions about the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilors, any questions for staff? Seeing no.
Good.
Excuse me?
No, I said I'm good.
Seeing no hands raised, we will move forward then to a public hearing for ordinance number 23-1489. We'll open that up. Connor, will you please describe to the audience our procedures for the public hearing?
Yes, thank you. So if anyone wishes to testify on ordinance number 23-1489, now is the time to do so. So once again, public testimony will be limited to 3 minutes, and I'll manage a timer to go off at the 3-minute mark. If you've not already signed up to speak, you can do so now by, if you're joining on Zoom, hitting the raise hand button, which depending on your version of Zoom is within the reactions tab or at the bottom of your screen. If you're dialing in on your phone, you can raise your hand by dialing *9. For those joining us in person, you can sign up now by filling out one of the blue cards in the back of the room and bringing that up to me. For those joining us via Zoom, I will be promoting you to a full panelist so that you're able to turn on your camera. So I'll call your name. You'll see a window pop up asking you to accept the promotion. Once you accept it, you'll rejoin as a panelist, where you'll be able to turn on your camera and unmute yourself. As a reminder to everybody testifying today, you do not need to give your physical address. However, please do identify yourself for the record before testifying. So folks, I'll just give you another couple of seconds to hit that raise hand button. Okay, and nothing has gone up, President Peterson.
All right. Seeing that we have no one coming forward for testimony, I will close the public hearing. Our second reading for council consideration and vote are scheduled for February 2nd. Thank you so much and welcome, Glenn.
Thank you very much.
All right. Next on our agenda is a high-capacity transit strategy update, readiness tiers. Councilors, this is a key policy focus area of the 2023 Regional Transportation Plan. The strategy categorizes investments over the span of decades and works to prioritize corridors where faster and more reliable service would provide the most benefit to the most people. I'm going to turn it over to our Director of Planning, Research, and Development, Margie Bradway.
Hi, good morning. Here with me virtually is a senior planner, Allie Holmquist. Wave, Allie. Okay, we've got her. Good. So I'll do a quick intro and hand it over to Allie. So you may or may not remember that in July 26th, we came to you, Allie and I, to present a framework for the update of the high capacity transit study. The last time the high capacity transit study was developed was in 2009, so it's much need of an update. And at that time, we talked about how the study really serves two purposes. One is to create a vision of high-capacity transit in our region, building on our very successful light rail system that we currently have today. And that is to go into the RTP. A key feature of this update is the inclusion of bus rapid transit and the expansion of bus rapid transit in our region. The second purpose of this study is to speak to our federal partners, and particularly the FTA. We have a long history in our region at JPACT and Metro Council of being able to speak with one voice and clearly advocate for federal funding. And this high capacity transit update allows us to effectively do that. So that's setting the stage. We come back to you with a lot of staff work and technical work that it's done since July. And I will let Allie take it from here.
Thank you very much, Margie. Really appreciate the introduction, and thank you so much, Council, for having me back today. I want to start by talking a little bit more about that technical work and what we've been doing since I was last before you in the fall. Next slide, please. So at that time, we were talking about the work that we were doing to establish the policy framework, which Margie just provided some background on, as well as the vision, which is so critically important. Next slide, please. And since then, we've buttoned up that work to better reflect the role of high-capacity transit as the backbone of the transportation network, really critical to supporting the Regional Transportation Plan and Metro's 2040 growth concept, Blueprint for Growth and Development in the Future. And at that time, we also established the characteristics of an optimal network, talked about the features that make transit high capacity, which you can see on the slide here, and then the elements that make it successful, what it really needs to be successful. Next slide, please. And as Margie already mentioned, Rapid Bus did provide us an opportunity to think differently about what the regional network could look like in the future. And that's because it can be more flexible and cost-effective to implement, and it has the potential to move projects more quickly through that federal development process that was already mentioned. And then I also just want to note, based on the graphic on the slide, it's also important to remember that high capacity transit is one part, a key part, but still one part of our broader transit strategy, playing a specific role in moving many people quickly along major travel corridors, and the highest form of regional transit, really a result of growing transit service. So we know there's still work to do to fill gaps, make transit more frequent, and then also make spot improvements to ensure that transit is reliable where it is frequent in particular. And those are all tools in the broader toolbox that we use to invest and grow our transit future. Next slide, please. And we were also working together to refine the vision. And that plan for the future is really critical to both realizing the future network that we want and also making investments in a way that best support regional goals. And we really have our nationally recognized MAX system today because of earlier similar work. And so we built from the policy framework that I spoke to earlier to really identify where we needed to add or improve high capacity transit corridors to make more connections between our regional centers and also to major town centers with Rapid Bus in line with our 2040 growth concept and the new opportunities that Rapid Bus provided. Next slide, please. And that was something that we did together as part of the JPAC Council workshop with partner advisory committees, and then also through tabling events with the public. And we heard in those discussions really a need to continue to support our established regional high capacity transit priorities where work's already underway. And then when thinking about identifying corridors in the near term, really focusing on where people are riding today, where there are places with lots of activity, dense main street environments, and where people can and do access corridors. And then also thinking about cost effectiveness and the dollars per rider. And then also for long-term corridors, thinking about addressing those other gaps in the network to really support the 2040 growth concept. And then we also heard a lot of support for more north-south and east-west connections in our network as well. So we worked with our partner working group to incorporate that feedback and then also do a policy check really to confirm that the vision that we developed met the intended outcomes established by that guiding policy framework. Next slide, please. And then for the established vision corridors, the next step was assessing their readiness for high capacity transit investment, really the crux of our work and what we've been doing since the fall. And it provides the framework to guide future investments in high capacity transit over decades, so within but even beyond the Regional Transportation Plan horizon of 2045. And then also really getting to creating that pipeline for prioritizing those investments to clearly articulate priorities, supporting our competitiveness for that federal funding that was already mentioned. All really key to forging the path towards realizing the vision, taking advantage of the larger pot of money for small starts, and thinking about how we can actually begin breaking ground. And so to do that, we used the approach that we discussed in the fall and worked with on partners that was really focused on building from the foundation of prior planning work to reflect the investment priorities of the region, and then also incorporating key factors that indicate competitiveness for that federal funding, really thinking about what would be successful next in that pipeline to move through the development process. Next slide, please. And so we used an approach similar to the one in the 2009 High Capacity Transit Plan to categorize the corridors, which this image on the slide is from here, and the result being a set of tiers establishing that investment pipeline. Next slide, please. And applying all of those different lenses together helped us see which corridors rose to the top, really indicating their readiness for this type of investment, the high capacity investment. So this first example is showing where people live in higher numbers in the darker blues on the map, where they work in higher numbers in the gray cross-hatched areas, and then in the darker red and orange, the corridors that are best serving where there's the highest need as far as travel between home and work. Next slide, please. And then we also looked at where the most people are riding today, shown in the darkers and oranges and yellows on this map. We also looked at future ridership, thinking about growth, but this in particular, the people riding today is really a key indicator in the federal process. And so we use this information and to compare the potential cost of the solution as well to how many riders could be expected, back to that cost effectiveness I mentioned before. Next slide, please. And then we also looked at where we're seeing much greater differences between travel times. So the darker red is where transit takes much longer, sometimes as much as 5 times longer than driving for a trip, showing a different kind of need and opportunity. And so we use this and other factors as well to consider what corridors could encourage people to ride transit rather than drive towards a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from this type of investment. Next slide, please. And we also looked at where those who rely on transit and historically marginalized communities are living. So shown in the purple shading and the purple dots that actually represent affordable housing developments, and also where those communities go, the yellow dots being essential services, destinations, and jobs. And then the corridors that are showing up in darker purple really showing where an investment would best meet the needs of these communities. Next slide, please. And then we also looked at what streets are more transit supportive. So those in darker red have the space to provide bus lanes or other priority treatments in the street, really towards the elements that rapid bus needs to be successful as a different kind of capital investment for high capacity transit. And then also thinking about where on a constrained, heavily used roadway, transit could actually help us build capacity and more people throughput through an alternative. And then these corridors also tend to have more sidewalks and bicycle facilities nearby, thinking about how people walk and roll and access the corridor. Next slide, please. And we also looked at the qualitative elements of readiness. So where there are plans and policies in place that further set up high capacity transit investments for success, really thinking about transit supportive street design and land use policies in local transportation plans and comprehensive plans, and then also other established partnership agreements and transit planning work as well. And we also considered where planning for some corridors might be more complex, like freight corridors, for instance, that have additional regulations tied to them. Next slide, please. And so we used all of that information to inform how we categorize the corridors into tiers. Tier 1 being the established regional priorities, really building from the feedback that we heard, where that planning work is done or already underway. So those are Southwest Corridor, Interstate Bridge, Montgomery Park Streetcar, 82nd Avenue and TV Highway Rapid Bus. And then we use the scoring to help us develop the other tiers. Tier 2 being where we saw those higher scores and that clear readiness to move forward with planning activities after we move Tier 1 through the project development process, potentially as soon as in the next 5 years. And given preliminary assumptions about funding opportunities, these Tier 1 and Tier 2 corridors are really the scale of the investments that we'd be looking for in the regional transportation plan. And one other thing I want to mention with Rapid Bus in particular, we really need strong partnerships towards getting these projects in the plan. It's not just the transit capital investment, but also the space and improvements to the roadway to give bus priority, especially thinking again about Rapid Bus, and help people to walk and roll on into the corridor, something that we're really looking towards cities, counties, and the state too as well, in addition to partnerships with our transit agencies. And so the next couple tiers, the Tier 3 and 4 here, developing corridors are where we're seeing some of the elements of readiness today emerging, but there's more time to make sure that all of the categories are ready to advance supportive plans or policies, or allow those plans and policies that are already in place to come to fruition through the market. And for many of these corridors, we'll be looking at making bus better in the nearer term through spot improvements to increase reliability and other transit investments to make sure that we're growing transit over time and getting them ready for that high capacity investment in the future. And then finally, similarly, the future corridors are also important future connections to supporting the 2040 growth concept, but are not yet indicating their readiness for this type of investment today, not demonstrating that strength and success in the federal development process in particular. And so those are also, again, where we would be looking at continuing to grow transit service in the future, building towards that high capacity transit investment as we're doing the other work to make sure that through land use and market supportiveness, that those are also ready in some of the other categories as well. Next slide, please. And so these are the tiering results also provided in your packet, so I won't spend too much time on them here, but the ways that we use the level of readiness to establish that pipeline for investment, and where we start working next as our current priorities move through the federal development process and really thinking about which corridors would be successful to engage in that process going forward. Next slide, please. And it's much easier to see on the map, I think. You can see those Tier 1 priority corridors in green, our developing priorities to turn to next in blue, the corridors that we're still working on developing in yellow, and the future connections that we want to make in orange. Next slide, please. So this month, we've been engaging in a ton of outreach, and we'll be continuing that over the next couple months. We've been working with TriMet's Equity Advisory Committee and Committee on Accessible Transportation, as well as reaching out to the small transit providers in Clackamas County. We've been teaming with TriMet for tabling events. There's 7 throughout the region. In fact, there's one tonight as well, as they're looking at going out for the 2023 annual service plan. And then we're also working on scheduling focus groups with small business organizations and chambers throughout the region to have additional conversations. And we are still working through our joint community-based organization contracts with the regional transportation plan process. The Street Trust has already started conversations, and we know that Verde is scheduling a focus group later this month, and there'll be more events that will happen over the next couple months. All of these really digging into community priorities and additional considerations around readiness that can support future corridor planning. And then I finally want to mention we have an interactive story map up on the website that support these outreach events and also provide other ways to engage, including in a virtual way. Next slide, please. And then looking ahead to next steps, our next major milestone is pulling together a report that really focuses on, in addition to describing what we did and why, what we can do to support implementing the vision we've established and best set up the corridor planning process, and also that moving projects through the federal development process as well. It'll also identify additional study that is needed to support realizing the vision, a couple of which we've already talked about: the access to transit and the focus on first last mile, and also getting to a rapid bus implementation plan as well to continue this work. Next slide, please. And so we'll be working on that report with our working group partners this spring before we would propose to return to you with a draft in May, which will be our final major milestone for the strategy update before we merge with the 2023 RTP update for that formal public review process in the summer. Next slide, please. So thank you very much again for having me today. And President Peterson, at this time, I look forward to hearing input or answer any questions from the council.
Thank you. Councilors, any questions, comments? Councilor Gonzalez.
Great. Allie, hey, nice to see you again. Definitely a lot of engagement. And I think this presentation has activated a lot of excellent dialogue and discussion. And it's really great that, EDPAC, JPAC, coordinating committees, I mean, you name it, right? You've been at them all. So it's been, so just good job. And also grateful for Margie and the team on continuing to take the feedback that we're hearing into an implementable plan. I see there are a lot of other hands raised as well, which I'm hoping share the feedback that we've received from community. I think the first thing that comes to me from this is that, of the feedback that we've received, there's that balance between this technical plan versus, the end all be all of plans or priorities that the region wants Metro to have. And, just looking at this strictly through the lens of, the parameters that we're working with, specifically with high capacity transit, and then also recognizing that all the other variables around safety or around efficiency or around emission, I mean, you name it, right? So I think that's a really important distinction that we're working on making with partners, while also taking that in and connecting it back to this huge moment that we had a few years ago with 2020, with Get Moving 2020. And so I think that just using the term tiers, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, also like is an emotional connection to the history of, all right, you know, like how do we make our projects feasible, you know, comparatively to others. So that's another thing to acknowledge. You know, one of the things that I have been sharing is important is a regional context. And I understand that there's a whole set of precedents around, you know, Metro and the work that we do being regionally balanced and looking at it through the criteria that we have. You know, I do think it's really important that that we use this plan as a tool to communicate with the region what our vision is, what our vision is for high capacity transit, not only in what's implementable for readiness, but also what we need to be able to bring to the table in terms of if your project isn't in that tier 1 and tier 2, what resources can we organize around a region so that we can get those going, because there's a lot of appetite for projects. I think people really have emotional, political, factual connection to the corridors that were identified in Get Moving 2020. And with all the great planning work that we did there, I want us to find those tools. And so a lot of this feedback you've already heard from me at different meetings, but you know, just also sharing it in this venue as we move forward. And I know that a lot of this is already in motion. Yeah, again, thank you for the work, and I think this is a really solid foundation for us to build from. But there's still a bit for us to do to bring everyone on board in the region and make sure that the corners of the region feel served by this plan, which is a top priority. Thanks, Allie.
Thank you, Counselor. I'm sorry.
Any feedback?
I wholeheartedly agree. I really appreciate Counselor Gonzalez pointing out the difference between what I would call corridors of regional importance, or in T20, certainly corridors where we're trying to meet multiple objectives of equity, mobility, climate, and distinguishing that between which corridors will be successful in high capacity transit. And if your corridor is not on the list or it's lower on the list, it does not mean it is not significant and we still don't need to meet those outcomes. It just might mean that high capacity transit's not the right tool to achieve those outcomes. It's just reiterating what you said. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Counselor Lewis.
Sure, thank you so much. And thank you, Allie, not only for the good work, but for giving this presentation at least 5 times, because I've seen it that many. And for being out in community at tables with TriMet and community partners and such. We've got to make sure you've got some good swag, because we need to make sure that people have their little Metro pens or whatever it is so they can remember who we are. But the opportunity to represent communities that aren't well served by transit as it is means that I have to say we need to move forward with this plan, but we cannot forget that there are areas that have no transit, and their opportunity to get connected to transit through regional shuttles, through better last mile or last miles services cannot be forgotten. So I understand that the charge and the mission of this study are what they are, but we need to lay that within the broader context of this is one tool and we can't forget the other tools. That said, I do see obviously continued need for advancing Southwest Corridor. I see the need for us to continue to talk about the needs along 99E, and the opportunity to make sure that local communities are making a statement about their access needs, whether that's connections to school, to places of worship, to stores and places people go. You know, we are so focused on employment centers and where people live. I hear a lot on 99E about the opportunity to connect some of the schools. So know that you're working on that and right direction. Let's keep going. And thank you for indulging me as I continue to raise the other tools that we can't forget about as we approach the RTP.
Thank you. Councilor Rosendahl.
Thank you, President Peterson. Again, thank Ali for a very smooth and effective presentation. I've heard this before. I have to comment, it's a very complicated process, and a lot of considerations have gone into it, which sometimes the smoothness of the presentation sort of belies the fact that there's a lot of thought and a lot of complexity that goes into this. I was reminded the comment that you made, Margie, I was asked the other day about, are these the only priorities? And I think your point is that there are other priorities for other kinds of streets. This is not the defining moment. Some people may think that, oh, if it's not on this list, then it's on no list, and that we have to counter that. I do have a question at the end. I have one more comment I want to make, and that is the same comment I made to the MPAC the other day, is I hope that the various jurisdictions will drill down a little bit and look at each of the corridors, particularly corridors tiers 1 and 2, in detail, and not think of them all as just covered by that category and therefore the same, because they all have very unique characteristics, unique limitations, unique funding needs, and unique jurisdictional complexities. And so I made that comment, and I hope that everybody takes that opportunity to look at that. My question is, do we have, for tier 1 and tier 2 separately or together, do we have a rough order of magnitude idea of the potential financial resources that would be needed and of the potential financial resources that might be available for the next 2 years? Do we have any way of thinking that we might get through both? You might be able to find funding for both of those categories, or how short are we going to be?
Yeah, thank you, Ali. I'll take a whack at this one. So for all of the corridors in tier 1, tier 2, the hope would be that we would be able to leverage federal investments either in the new starts or the small starts. Currently, sitting in tier 1, we have new starts. We're hoping to get new starts for, that's typically light rail, so that's Southwest Corridor. Small starts is typically BRT. But not always, and that's 82nd Avenue and TV Highway. For those, we have to raise local match. Unfortunately, for Southwest Corridor, that local match was in the transportation measure that failed. We were going to raise $1 billion. The match is quite large because the size of the project is quite large. Because we don't have any other kind of sources in the pipeline, we are trying to piece together the funding to keep that project into project development. But it is not clear that we have the ability to raise $1 billion or even $800 million would be like the minimum that TriMet and Metro leadership think we need to really get that project ready for construction. So that's work to be done. But really, for all, after this study is adopted in the RTP, it becomes kind of a work plan with our partners at TriMet. And we have a brother-sister relationship with TriMet, where Metro does the NEPA work and then TriMet does the project development and takes it from 30%. So it really takes both agencies sitting down and committing to that work plan. But this is my way of saying that it's not clear right now if we'll have the funding to do everything, kind of to raise the local match for the federal funds. And that the local match can come from anywhere. It can come from the legislature, it can come from our local partners, it can come from us. You may remember in the RUFA conversation, what?
Couch cushions.
Couch cushions, it could come from the MTIP couch cushions.
Bake sales.
Right, to get these studies off the ground for 82nd Avenue and TV Highway came from a federal grant. 82nd Avenue Transit Study right now did come from the couch cushions of federal funding that we had here at Metro. Metro is funding that currently on our own for this phase of the project. So we will continue to work with you to raise and collect the finances we need to realize this dream.
We will. Thank you.
Seeing no hands raised, I just want to kind of talk through, maybe as we go through getting ready for the RTP, to Councilor Lewis's. There are other tools. Is there a way that as we move along, we can show how each one of these tools in transit increases accessibility.
Yes.
Because I'm seeing a layered map in my head coming together. And I don't know if there's a way to say we want to have a minimum of accessibility, right? And then be able to say, here are the parts of the region that meet that after we implement this plan. And here are some of the gaps that we still need to work on, and maybe there are other tools. But just trying to figure that out, because that's the whole point of having the transit, is to increase accessibility, so.
Absolutely. And Ally, as our transit planner, would you like to speak to this? I feel like not being in the room sometimes she doesn't get a chance to answer questions. Go ahead, Ally.
Sure. Actually, I think our transit vision map and some of the future network maps that we do for the RTP are actually a great start for this, because we start to layer on the high capacity transit plan with the not only, you know, the transit service that we have today, but also looking at how we would increase that in the future, that more frequent service, what that would look like, and then also down to the shuttles and the shuttle planning that we have today. So I think that we've actually got a start. We did one for 2018 that we're looking to update for 2023. And then we also have performance measures that look at accessibility and thinking about access to where people live and work and essential destinations too, because we also heard beyond jobs as a performance measure. And so that's all things that we can bring back that I think would be really great.
Yeah, we just had a really good conversation with our Ask Me leadership here in Metro, and they were working with some OCC staff, and the staff had to get up and leave to take transit home, which was going to be an hour and a half or two to get home. And so accessibility really, especially as the region becomes more and more unaffordable until we can get more housing built and bring that down, this issue will continue. So I guess my last question is around express bus service, because it is, are we including this as a conversation with 67% of Clackamas County residents getting up and going to 3 other counties to work every morning, and not a whole lot of accessibility with only 2 bridges?
Yeah, so that really, in my mind, and Ally, correct me if I'm wrong, and please pipe in, falls in the bucket of ETC, or enhanced transit improvements. And as you know, there are some bus on shoulder experiments in our region that have been very successful. Metro is kind of re-kicking off the second phase of our ETC, or Better Bus is another name, program. We used $5 million of our CRISA funding, and TriMet met that $5 million for a total of $10 million. And with Kelly Bettridge on board, she is working with her team to launch that and work with locals to identify locations that would improve the travel times of those frequent routes. So it's not exactly what you're asking, but I would say Express Bus is part of that ETC look. And anything else to add, Ally?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, great, thank you. Councilors, any other questions? All right, seeing none?
Thank you.
Thank you, much appreciated.
Yeah, great work, Ally.
Thank you,
Good
yeah.
work, Ally. Nice.
All right, we'll move on to Chief Operating Officer Communication, Marisa?
Okay. Hello again. Thank you, President Peterson and councilors. I have a few pieces of grant-related news to share with you today from across Metro. I'm very pleased to let you know that next week we will announce the grantees selected for this year's Community Placemaking Grants. Our Community Placemaking Grants provide critical resources to help people tackle challenges through community-led, equity-centered, arts and culture-based efforts that strengthen communities' connections to each other and the places that they care about. These grants also allow us to take up complex, regionally significant issues and test small-scale, innovative, community-driven solutions. Councilors Lewis and Wong serve on the program's advisory group, along with 6 community members, all people who work at the intersection of arts, culture, and social justice in our region. Metro received 92 applications requesting nearly $2 million in funding. With this demand, staff is looking for ways to leverage more dollars to support these community-led efforts, especially as we just had over $200,000 to award. So 10 proposals were selected for grants. The 2023 grants will feature untold stories of Japanese internment at what is now Expo Center, 2 separate pop-up market series in Gresham and East Portland, giving economic opportunities to local vendors of color, a celebration of BIPOC construction pioneers who pointed the way for other low-income Oregonians of color to enter the construction trades, among many other amazing efforts that will take place throughout the region. In the 7 cycles since the program's inception, Metro has supported 68 community-led efforts totaling just over $1.2 million. These grants continue to be a cost-effective and very well-received means of advancing racial equity and reaching groups we may not otherwise interact with. In other grant news, we are excited to share that the 2023 Investment and Innovation Grant Cycle is kicking off. As a quick reminder, the I&I Grant Program supports for-profit businesses, nonprofit organizations, and colleges and universities involved in creative efforts to prevent waste or make better use of waste through repairing, reusing, recycling, or composting materials. Program grant amounts range between $10,000 and $100,000 and can be used to support personnel costs, materials, supplies, equipment, while capital grants run between $50,000 and $500,000, which can be used to support larger infrastructure improvements and equipment. Metro will be accepting pre-proposal applications through February 23rd, so please help us spread the word that that funding is available. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilors, Councilor Communication. Councilor Wong.
Great, thank you, Madam President. Let's see, MPAC met last night for our first meeting of the year, and we voted in new officers. So Gresham City Councilor Vince Jones Dixon is our chair this year, and Washington County Commissioner Pam Treese and Oregon City Mayor Denise McGriff will serve as the first and second vice chairs. We had the presentation from Ellie on the high capacity transit, and some members expressed concerns about relative tier placement of various corridors, including the criteria for tier placement itself. There was also a concern about whether the tiers took into account the impact of tolling that could occur sooner rather than later on some transit improvements. We also had a presentation about the garbage and recycling system facilities plan. There was broad agreement that looking closely at West Side needs is an important aspect of this work. Members also wanted to ensure that private companies provide competitive transfer station waste, and that simultaneously private innovation is prioritized. I'm also doing the update for CORE. CORE met last week, and we heard the same presentation on the facilities plan from WPEZ. And we also announced Rahi's upcoming departure. And for today, I'll simply say that folks on CORE were all in agreement that that's a huge loss for our agency, but a wonderful next step for Rahi. So again, congratulations to her, and we'll be looking forward to the recruitment process for the new DEI director. Thank you.
Great. Councilor Gonzalez.
Thanks, President Peterson. A few days ago, maybe it was a week, I don't know, time is fluid. I attended a legislative reception organized by the West Side Economic Alliance, which I serve as a board member on behalf of the council. And it was really interesting. It was a collection of legislators on the West Side, most of them new, but I think that trend is probably consistent across the state. So a lot of new legislators, and it was really interesting to hear the discussion about priorities. Housing, behavioral health were very top of mind for all of the legislators, which is excellent considering our housing bond and our supportive housing services measure. And so I'm looking forward for our council to work with our Metro Region Caucus in ensuring that we get the necessary resources so that the SHS measure is able to achieve success and really fill the gaps that exist with behavioral health and a whole suite of other things. Another pretty big takeaway that I thought was surprising was that transportation and infrastructure didn't come up. And so I think it'll be important for us to, as a council, to continue working with our state reps, our senators, so that they know what our priorities are and specifically what the opportunities are with the bipartisan infrastructure law, with the RTP that we have going on right now, really moving into education and, of course, supporting the work that our state legislative team is doing down in Salem right now. I know that we have some GAP-D folks down there. So something to keep really top of mind, something that's important to us with some of the corridors that are in LPA mode and need to continue securing resources, as well as there's some big bridges being built that I think we all know about. So yeah, just sharing a theme that really that I took away from that, and hoping that there's some good takeaways for the council. So
Thank you. Councilors? This morning was the Westside Economic Alliance Forum on Westside Real Estate Insights, and I wanted to paraphrase something that the moderator of a panel said. Blake Hearing with Gantry, and Gantry is a mortgage banking company, local, and he said that because we have an urban growth boundary, it provides the stability for the mortgage banking community to be able to know that there's less risk when they make that investment. And I thought that was very, very confirming of what we know here at Metro, but don't hear a whole lot back on that. I also thought it was interesting that all of these developers, from industrial lands to retail to multifamily, had moved their business pre-COVID, COVID out to the west side, and because they wanted to be able to have jurisdictions that moved more quickly through the development process and were easier to work with, and now they are finding that that's strained as well, and that's what we're hearing from the cities down in the legislature. In order to have land ready, whether that's inside the urban growth boundary or any new land that would come in the future, that land readiness, they don't have the planners, they don't have the inspectors, and they certainly don't have the infrastructure money to make it happen. So it was all very confirming of what we are hearing from the cities. So that's interesting. Any other council communications? All right. Then we are adjourned. And the next council meeting is on January 31st, 2023 at 10:30 a.m. See y'all there. Cheers.
Recording stopped.